اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. خل المقادير تمضي لا تغالبها، فإن من غالب الأقدار مغلوب. إن القضاء لسيف لا يقاومه شيء من الخلق إلا وهو محبوب. وامشي رويدا مع الأقدار في مهل، فإن من يكره الأقدار متعوب. سلم وفوض لحكم الله محتسبا، فإنما الأمر مقضي ومكتوب. والله يقضي بما شاء وكيف يشاء، والعبد عبد ومخلوق ومربوب. ولم يزل ربه الرحمن يكلأه، باللطف والحفظ محفوف ومصحوب. حسن ظنونك بالرب الكريم، ولا تسيء ظنا فتبقى عنه محجوب. واعمل لنفسك أعمالا تسر بها، فكل ما يفعل الإنسان محسوب. إن كان خيرا فخير سوف يحصل، أو كان شرا فتنكيل وتعذيب. يا ويل من ضيع الأعمار في زلل، وكل من والحوب. واطلب علوما مع إقبال مع عمل، فأنت بالعلم والأعمال مطلوب. واحذر زمانك هذا إنه زمن، به المناكير شاعت والمعايب. فكن وحيدا فريدا خاملا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue our lessons in Mantiq, Sullam Munawraq of Imam al-Akhdari. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah bless us with His mercy and His blessing, and may Allah make us among those who always remember Him in each and every moment. And we are in the blessed day of Isra wal Mi'raj. We pray that Allah open for us any doors of understanding and doors of amal, that we are able to practice what we have learned. And may Allah bless us with husnul khatima, ameen ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah we will continue from where we stopped in our last lesson. Let us look at the matan of Sullam. So in our last lesson, we have completed all the conditions of the four forms, the al-ashkal al-arba'a. So we spoke about the first shakal, the second shakal, the third shakal, the fourth shakal. So in our last lesson, we have completed the fourth shakal. So this is where the author mentioned the four forms, where he mentioned والثاني أن يختلف في الكيف مع كلية الكبرى له شرط وقع، والثالث الإيجاب في سراهما وأن ترى كلية إحداهما. Then he mentioned ورابع. This is where we spoke about in the last week. ورابع عدم جمع الخصتين إلا بصورة ففيها يستبين. So we spoke about al-khisatain. And khisatain, the word khisatain in Mantiq it refers to particular and negativity. So it is as-saliba and what we call it al-juz'iyya. As-saliba and juz'iyya. So if there is a combination, the author is saying, of both negative any terms and this particular, then it is not any muntij, and it doesn't any give any the proper any conclusion. So this is the condition of the fourth any shakal, except any in one situation where the author any mention yani if the minor any premise any is mujiba juz'iyya and the major premise any saliba kulliyya. This is any the only any exceptional case. So we mentioned this, and I've given any the examples, and you can refer to what I mentioned any last week in the last lesson. Then he mentioned fa muntijun li awwalin arba'atun kathani summa salisun fasittatun. So when it comes any to the first any shakal, any there are four any of the types any that gives the valid any conclusion. The second is 6, and the second any is 4 kathani. Summa thalisun fasittatun, yani the third any shakal any gives any 6 any out of 16. Out of the 16 types, 6 any gives any the proper conclusion. And when comes any to the fourth any shakal, it is khamsa, it is 5 qad antaja wa ghayru ma zakartuhu lam yuntija. So other than that, yani doesn't give the valid any conclusions. So if we add up any all this, and that's what I mentioned in the last any lesson, you add up any 4 any for the first any shakal, and then 4 for the second shakal, and 6 for the third shakal, 5 any for this 4 shakal altogether, and we will have any 19 any out of 64 any, because any 16 any we times 4. For every shakal any we have any the 16 base any on the table. So 19 any out of any 16 type. So our lesson any today, and will begin any from here. So this is when basically any we stop. Then the author any mentioned وَتَتْبَعُ النَّتِيجَةُ الْأَخَصُّ مِنْ تِلْكَ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ هَكَذَا زُكِنْ. Then this is any the principle when it comes any to the conclusion of the arguments. The conclusion is if there is negativity in any of the premises, or there is any particular sentences that is in any of the premises, then the natija, the conclusion, it follows any the negativity, and it follows any the particular. So this is what the author mentions. So this is a qaida. This is a principle when it comes to the natija, when it comes to the conclusion. This is this is what you call it, we call it the qaida, or the principle. So let me give you an example. Some of this we have gone through last time. So the example is this. We have for example this argument, kullu insan hayawan. Kullu insan hayawan, all humans are beings. And then the major premise and the second premise is ba'dul jismi insan. So now what do you have? And you have this particular, this al-juz'iyya. Tamam? This is mujaba. This is kulliyya mujaba. But this is juz'iyya mujaba. It is a positive sentence, but there is a particular term here. That is ba'd, some. Some bodies are humans. So the first premise mentioned, all humans are beings. The second premise mentioned, and some bodies are humans. So the natija now must be particular. So this is what the author mentioned. If any of particular mentioned in any of the premise, the conclusion must have a particular, must be particular. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is ba'dul hayawan jismun. Some beings are bodies. Some beings are bodies. So here we have a universal proposition. Here we have a particular one, because of the word ba'd, some. So the conclusion follows which one? It follows al-akhas, because this is called khissa. Particular is called al-khiss. So the conclusion follows. Likewise when it comes to negativity. When it comes to negativity, here we have a negative sentence. So the first any premise say kullu insan hayawan. All yani humans are beings. Second premise says la shay'a min al farasi bi insan. Nothing any from horses any are humans. Then the conclusion any follows negative. So here positive, negative, it follows negative. Universal, particular, it follows particular, not universal. So this is any a principle any in Mantiq. Even in English any it is the same. English any you come up any with a positive any proposition and a negative any proposition. The conclusion any must always any be the negative. This is the meaning of al-akhas. You have universal any proposition and a particular any proposition. The conclusion any is particular, not universal. Now this example, you have negative any universal. Negative universal, and because I say la shay'a min al faras, any nothing from any horses are insan. Now what you call it, the conclusion any is follows yani the negativity. Aywa. So this any what any the author yani mentioned when he mentioned when he speaks any about the principle. Here he is speaking about principle and how you determine any the natija. How do you determine any the natija? Whether the natija yani is a positive or negative, whether it is universal or particular. Now yani you look at the premises any before it. If there is any negativity, the natija yani is negative. If there is any particular, natija yani is particular. طيب. So he mentioned وَتَتْبَعُ النَّتِيجَةُ الْأَخَصُّ مِنْ تِلْكَ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ هَكَذَا زُكِنْ. هَكَذَا زُكِنْ meaning ulim. This is how it is known. So this is a principle qaida. And then he mentioned وَهَذِهِ الْأَشْكَالُ بِالْحَمْلِ مُخْتَصَّةٌ وَلَيْسَ بِالشَّرْطِ. Yani the author mentioned that these conditions that we mentioned on the forms, it is specific to the propositions of hamliya. Yani hamliya we mentioned these are the unconditional propositions. So the author mentioned only unconditional propositions can be applied to what we have mentioned on the four forms, and it is not the conditional proposition. After this we are going to speak about conditional propositions. And conditional propositions meaning propositions that is begun by a condition, if for example or when. This is a conditional sentence. So this is called qadaya shartiyya. When it comes to hamliya, these are propositions that you do not have conditional phrases. You do not have any conditional phrases. This is difference between hamliya and shartiyya. We covered this in many lessons before, since it has been some time. So I will just explain briefly. So here the author is saying these conditions are only applied to unconditional propositions. But of course, in reality, many of the scholars of Mantiq mentioned that even conditional propositions also can be applied to the conditions that are mentioned. And this is mentioned by the commentators of Sullam Munawraq. We will touch on that inshallah when we enter into Qiyas istisnai. As for now, we take it as such that the author is saying that it is only specific to qadaya hamliya. And then he mentioned wal hadfu wa fi ba'd al muqaddimati aw an natijati li ilmin ati. So the author is saying that it is permissible that we omit some of the premises and we leave the conclusion, or sometimes it is permissible that we omit the conclusion and we leave the premises. So what is the example? So again I will give some examples. This is the example, and it is an example in what you call it, it's mentioned by Sheikh Said Fuda, for example, in his commentary. So this is the example, and we say kullu zanin yuhad. Kullu zanin, this is the first premise. Kullu zanin yani yuhad. Everyone who commits zina, everyone who commits any adultery is given the capital punishment. Yuhad here meaning is given the capital punishment. Hada zanin wa kullu zanin yuhad. Then the next premise we say hada zanin, this person commits zina, and all that commits zina, is given the capital punishment. And then we keep quiet on the natija. We do not see out the natija. So we say all who commits adultery are punished, and this person commits adultery. Meaning what? Meaning this person will be punished. So even if we do not mention the conclusion, it is known. The conclusion is known. So this is the meaning of hazfun natija. This is the meaning of hazfun natija. Sometimes it is a premise that we omit. It is the premise that we omit. For example, we say kullu zanin yuhad. Kullu zanin yuhad. Hada zanin. As what we mentioned, all those who commits adultery are punished, and this person commits adultery. So the conclusion is that this person is punished. If we do not mention the second premise, we say kullu zanin yuhad. Kullu zanin yuhad. Fahada yuhad. The conclusion say fahada yuhad. Then we understand that the premise is that this person has committed adultery. That is why he is given the capital punishment. So these are so many examples. Sometimes we can omit the conclusion, sometimes we will omit the premise. So when we omit the premise, we can understand the meaning of the premise based on the conclusion. So by this we have completed the part of al-qiyas al-iqtirani. So all this while we are speaking about al-qiyas al-iqtirani. And al-qiyas al-iqtirani differs from qiyas al-istisnai, which we will speak about. We will enter a bit, we do not have much time to speak about qiyas al-istisnai. I will take some minutes that I have to explain what is qiyas al-istisnai. So the author began by defining what is qiyas al-istisnai. So he mentioned wa minhu, from amongst al-qiyas, from the types of al-qiyas, types of syllogism, ma yud'a bil istisnai, which is qiyas al-istisnai, yu'rafu bisharti bilam tirai. So what is qiyas al-istisnai? It is known as qiyas al-sharti, meaning these are the conditional types of syllogism. The conditional types of syllogism. So we mentioned earlier that in terms propositions, some propositions are non-conditional propositions, some propositions are conditional propositions. So when it comes to syllogism, we mention the meaning of iqtirani. Iqtirani in English, we call it deductive, because we deduce from the premises the conclusion. So this is qiyas al-iqtirani. Whereas qiyas al-istisnai, we do not deduce from the premises, but we took one of the premises to be the conclusion. So let me explain again. This is very important. The difference between qiyas al-iqtirani and qiyas al-istisnai. What is the difference? Qiyas al-iqtirani, we deduce the conclusion. We deduce the conclusion. We do not take any of the premises as a conclusion, but we deduce from the premises conclusion. For example, we say al-alam mutaghayyir wa kullu mutaghayyir hadith. The universe changes, and anything that change is contingent. So what do we deduce from this argument? Al-alamu hadith, that this universe is contingent. This is called qiyas al-iqtirani. So meaning the conclusion you deduce from the argument. When it comes to qiyas al-istisnai, when qiyas istisnai, for example, we say law kana hadha insanan kana lakana hayawanan. If this thing is a human, then it is a being. If this thing is a human, then it is a being. فهو فهذا إنسان. And we say that this thing is a human. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion that it is a being. So now the conclusion is part of the premise. The conclusion is the premise itself. لو كان هذا إنسانا لكان حيوان لكنه إنسان. But it is a human. فهو حيوان. So he is from the being. So this is what we call Qiyas istisnai. So the difference is that Qiyas istisnai, the conclusion we do not deduce from the premises, but we take the conclusion from one of the premises. So this is the difference. So this is where the author mentioned the difference. He said وَهُوَ الَّذِي دَلَّ عَلَى النَّتِيجَةِ أَوْ ضِدِّهَا بِالْفِعْلِ لَا بِالْقُوَّةِ. So the author mentioned in the Qiyas al-istisnai is such that you get the natija, the conclusion, أو ضدها, or the opposite of what you call it, the meaning, in terms of what you call it, the opposite in terms of its negation. It is bil fi'li la bil quwwati. You get the conclusion bil fi'li. What is the meaning bil fi'li? Meaning in either of the premise, you take it. You take the conclusion from either of the premise, not by deduction. Not by deduction. La bi quwwati. So this difference than Qiyas al-Iqtirani. Type then he speaks about the types of Qiyas al-Istisnai. He said فَإِنْ يَكُ الشَّرْطِيُّ ذَا اتصَّالِ أَنْتَجَ وَضْعُ ذَاكَ وَضْعَ التَّالِ وَرَفْعُ تَالٍ رَفْعَ أَوَّلٍ وَلَا يَلْزَمُ فِي عَكْسِهِمَا لِمَنْ جَلَى. So this is the first type of Qiyas al-Istisnai. We call it Qiyas al-Istisnai al-Muttasil, al-Sharti al-Muttasil, because there are two types. We have Muttasil and Munfasil. We have the attached conditional type of Qiyas istisnai, and we have the detached type of conditional in Qiyas al-Istisnai. So these are the two types that the author is speaking about. After this, I actually plan to speak on one of it. So maybe I will just give some examples. This is the example. So I will just go through this inshallah ta'ala. I will just go through this before we end our lesson for today. So the first type of Qiyas al-Istisnai is al-Muttasil. And you see this Muttasil? This is al-Muttasil here, meaning it is attached. So this is the example of Qiyas al-Istisnai. So this is the type of syllogism. So let us look at the first premise. The first premise in Qiyas al-Istisnai is called Muqaddam. And in Arabic, it differs in Qiyas Iqtirani. Qiyas Iqtirani, we mentioned about Mawdu and Mahmul, the subject and the predicate. But in Qiyas al-Istisnai, we call it the Muqaddam. The Muqaddam is the first premise, and then we have the Tali. The Tali is the second. So this is an example of Qiyas al-Istisnai. So we have a conditional proposition here. لو كان هذا إنسانا. If this is a human, لكان حيوانا. Then it must be a being. If this is a human, it must be a being. So if this is a human, this is called Muqaddam. This must be a being. This is called Tali. So there are four possibilities. So this is divided into two parts. This is divided into two parts. Here we have positivity, here we have negativity. Positivity, negativity. Negativity meaning we take the opposite, which we will speak about. So now when we take the positive statements. Positive any statements. So now the natija we add any lakin, but. So now we go to the first one. لو كان هذا إنسانا لكان حيوان. if I affirm the muqaddam, I affirm. I say lakinnahu insan, and you look here at the bottom right, lakinnahu insan. So now the meaning is now, if this is human, then it must be a being. But this is a human. But this is a human. So we have the word lakin here. But this is a human, fahuwa hayawan. Then it must be a being. So now, if we affirm the muqaddam, then the affirmation also will bring to the tali. Yani, if you say that it is any human, then it must be hayawan. If it is human, it must be hayawan. So if the natija, you say that lakinnahu insan fahuwa hayawan, then the natija is that it must be a being. Meaning, if something is a human, then it must be a being, because any humans are part of beings. طيب. But if I affirm the tali instead, but I do not affirm the muqaddam, what happens? Yani law kana hadha insanan lakana hayawan lakinnahu hayawan. Instead of saying lakinnahu insan, I say lakinnahu hayawan. Now this doesn't give any conclusion. This doesn't give any conclusion, because when we say but it is hayawan, we do not know. Being there are many animals, are beings, humans, are beings. So what type of beings are we talking about? So we do not know. That is why we cannot come up with a conclusion. That is why you see the X here. You see the X here. So this is an example of the positive application. The second type, we take the opposite. We take the opposite by putting a negative. By putting a negative. What is by putting a negative? Now we go back to the same argument. Law kana hadha insan lakana hayawan lakinnahu laysa insan. And instead of saying lakinnahu insan in the first example, now we negate. We say lakinnahu laysa insan. So if we say lakinnahu laysa insan, that it is not any human, now it doesn't give any conclusion. It doesn't give any conclusion, because negating any human, it doesn't mean that this thing must be from the beings. It is not necessary that way. So that is why there is no conclusion. There is no conclusion. Why there is no conclusion? Because it is not clear. Because when you negate any humans, so you cannot be saying that it must be beings. It can be something else. It is not necessary that it must be beings. So this is the first situation. The second is we negate the tali. So by saying law kana hadha insan lakana hayawan lakinnahu laysa hayawan. Now we say lakinnahu laysa hayawan, but it is not hayawan. Then now we get the conclusion. Fahuwa laysa insanan. So we say that but it is not any being. So now when we say but it is not any being, if it is not any being, then it must be not humans, because humans is part of beings. So at least we get a natija. So in these four situations, you look at the picture here, there are two X, and the green one are the Mantiq, the ones that gives the conclusion. So out of the four situations, only the two situations that gives the conclusion, and two that does not give conclusion. So this is an example of Qiyas istisnai al-muttasil. Al-muttasil. Inshallah, in our next lesson, and we speak about al-munfasil. Wallahu a'lam bis-shawab. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.